Welcome to All Home Care Matters, the show where we discuss all things home care, with discussions on important age-related matters and topics. Brought to you by Enriched Life Home Care Services, the #1 rated home care provider in Michigan by Top Rated Local.
Hello, and welcome back to All Home Care Matters. If this is your first time visiting us here at the show, we want to say thank you for taking time out to be with us today. We appreciate how valuable everyone's time is, and that's why we try and make each episode here at All Home Care Matters something that will hopefully matter to you. Today, we are honored to welcome Irene Walker. Irene is a realtor, a mother, a former family caregiver, and the author of Forgiving the Man Who Forgot, A Grateful Gratitude Attitude. Welcome, Irene. How are you?
Good. Thank you so much for having me. I'm doing really well. Thank you.
Oh, it's our pleasure. I first want to start, you sent us a copy of the book, and I just want to say it really, I don't know, maybe it was the mood I was in or the mindset, and the inside you inscribed, Lance, savor the moments. And then I was looking through all the pictures you sent, and we're going to dive into that here in a minute. You were, the family caregiver for your husband, and I have young children, and I'm looking through all the photos of your husband with, I think a lot of them were with your daughter, just going off my memory. And, it kind of resonates. Some of those pictures, they were having a milkshake together, and I'm like, that could be me and my daughter, And then I read, savor the moments, That is so true, right? We really do have to savor those moments. And you've written this incredible book, and I want to start it off with, why don't you share with our viewers and listeners when you first started noticing, something is off with my husband, and let's start at that point and we'll work from there.
Okay. I had never personally been exposed to dementia, Alzheimer's, or any of that. Nobody in my family had that. Nobody in his family had that. So I honestly didn't see the signs until he got to the point. He was an IT contractor, so he would work in contract positions that would start as 3 months and usually carry on for a few years. And then those positions were slowly moving away, and he wasn't able to learn new stuff. I used to say to him, you've got to, IT is all about learning, and, it's a rapid growing technology. Little did I know the poor fellow was having such a hard time with any of that. He couldn't learn that, so he wasn't doing that. And he was shutting down. He was kind of getting involved in his own little world. And I thought, he was just being selfish. Then he went into a depression, and that usually does follow when you are under the dementia umbrella. He wasn't eating. He would take himself to the doctor. So I said, okay, that's it. I'm going to take you to the doctor. We're going to go and we're going to get you something for the depression. So we went there, and the doctor, gave him something and for his depression, and he seemed to come out of the depression, which was great. We were all so thrilled. And then maybe another month after that, I'm like, you don't know what day it is. And I know that you're not working. And sometimes when you're on that holiday mode, you don't know what day it is. Is it Thursday? Is it Tuesday? But he honestly didn't know the day or the time. And I thought maybe this medication that he's on isn't good for him. So let's go back to the doctor. So we went back to the doctor, and I told her everything. And she looked at me and she looked at him and she said, okay, Robert, I'm going to give you 3 words and you have to give them back to me in the same order. And he couldn't do that. He could maybe do 2. And then she said, I want you to draw a clock. So he drew this, it looked like Big Ben, and the numbers were outside the circle. And she looked at me and I looked at her, and she said, I think he has early onset dementia. And I was like, no, what?
Yeah.
No.
How old was he at this time?
He was 51. So I was in denial for probably a good solid month. And then I accepted it. And, it was a journey, ever since after that. So yeah, it was a shock to me. And, when I look back, of course, there were signs, but I was not in denial, but I just didn't know the signs to see the signs.
Right. You don't know what you don't know.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
How did your kids respond to that? Like, what was the conversation like with them, and how old were they at that time?
My daughter was probably around 11, and my son was about, no, maybe he was about 10, and my son was about 13. And in all honesty, I was trying to protect them, and I didn't want to say there was something that horribly wrong with him because I didn't want them to have, bad memories of a childhood. I wanted them to still bring their friends over. I wanted them to still think their dad was great and not a sickly individual. And in all honesty, I thought this was going to be a very, very long process. I thought, oh, we're going to be like, 20 years before, I have to think about doing something, serious with him. But with early onset, it tends to happen much quicker. So I did say, listen, your dad has a memory, issue. And they were like, oh yeah, we know, he never remembers anything. So I was trying to keep everything very light and happy because that also worked better for my husband, for Robert. If you got anxious or worried or snippy, he couldn't handle that. So I kept everything very light and happy, and it's all going to be fine, and don't worry. And we're going to get through this, and your dad's just being a silly Billy when he forgets, and blah 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 blah. And at that time, they were like the preteen going into the teens, so their world was all about them, as you well know as a parent. So they weren't as involved they were kind of pulling away from the family stuff, which is what they're supposed to do at that age. And, I embraced that for them and tried to protect them, I guess, I was really trying to do was protect them.
Did they realize maybe mom's not giving us the whole truth, or mom's not really giving it to us straight? Because like we'll tell our kids something and they'll be like, that doesn't sound like the whole story. Like, how did you handle those conversations if they happened?
Not at the beginning, no. For the first few years, no, not at the beginning. They didn't. But then they started to ask a few things. And I just said, yeah, it's a little bit more serious, more my son because he was older than my daughter. And I said, one day I'll tell you all about it. And he wasn't as bad. Then he started to progressively get bad. And when he was getting really bad, my son was like, there's something. He had moved out and was going to university, and he said, there's something up, Mom. My kids are early babies or later in the year babies, so they started things earlier. And I said, yeah, there is something up with him. Your dad has dementia. I knew it. I knew it. Oh my gosh. So then he was old enough to handle that. I think if I told them when they were younger, because it's kind of a process, I don't know if they could have handled it as well as when they were able to mature. And my daughter even said, I'm so glad you didn't tell me at that time. Because she goes, my life would have spun out of control from me. So, and now, thank God, they're like very well balanced, adults in their 20s.
Sure.
So, yeah.
How and I said you were a realtor, so you're working and you're caring for your husband. How were you able to juggle both of those things? That had to be quite the undertaking. Did you have help?
So I live in Canada, so I was able to get some help, but because we were young, I didn't get as much help as, somebody, like they said to me, listen, like we can give you 3 hours of a person, a personal care worker a month. So I have to help out, the little old couple, and they're both in a wheelchair. We have to help them out. And I'm like, no, I get it. I totally get it. My family lives down in the States, so I didn't really have a lot of support. And it's not something that you ask a friend, which is wrong. You should be able to ask a friend for that type of support. But that's a big support when he needed that support. there was a point where I could leave him alone. I'd put on the TV, or we'd join a program where he could go and I could drop him off for the afternoon. So that was all good. And then you would pay for somebody to come, but sometimes that doesn't work out also because, they say they're going to be there at a certain time and they can't make it. And then all of a sudden you're stuck in a pickle. So it was really challenging. As far as my real estate career, I probably should have been in a different spot there than when I was, because my time was really pulled into taking care of him. But I did it and put my kids through school and university, and managed to make ends meet and pay for his care. But it was really challenging. It was very, very challenging.
How long were you able to care for him at home?
I cared for him at home. He'll be passing away in February, coming up 3 years, and he was in facility for about 2 years. So he passed away when he was 59. So I probably cared for him, I don't know, six odd years at home.
When you're caring for him at home, you mentioned some of the challenges, people not showing up, being able to have that, family support and things. What other challenges did you have?
I can guarantee you I was in a depression myself, because it is a full-time gig and you're trying to just care for this person, at the same time absorb the loss of, a marriage, of, your loved one, all your plans, all that sort of stuff. So I guarantee you I was just, there was a point, especially near the end of caring for him, I was just putting one foot in front of the other, because he never slept very well. So we would be up every couple of hours. So I think it was years that I never slept. So you get up with them, you make sure everything's settled. I didn't want to talk. I didn't want to irritate him, because sometimes he'd think you'd be going to work, or maybe most of the time he needed to use the washroom. So you just wanted everything calm. So I wouldn't speak. You just kind of guide him. You'd place him. You'd clean him off, get him back to bed, settle down. You just kind of pass out. Okay, here we go again. So I was definitely in, a walking form of depression, managing him. But at the time, I wouldn't have done it any other way. Number one, it was very expensive to put him in any sort of care. But number two, I knew I was going to give him the best care possible that nobody else would be able to give him. Mind you, near the end, that is a falsehood, because you cannot provide that care. Professionals have to provide that care for them. But
how did he respond to this, from the time he got the diagnosis to then, seeing all the help and all the things that he's going through? Did he realize at some point something's wrong, or did he feel guilty? Did he have the ability to feel guilty?
no, he, because he was quite far along when he got the diagnosis. Like when I look back, it was probably years before
Yeah.
he was sick, and I just didn't see it and wasn't aware of it. And I don't think he realized it. And that's the thing I find with people who do have dementia. It is their own little world. They're just trying to survive in that own little world, and they don't see the things that we see kind of from the outside. And then when I was aware of it, I was like, oh my gosh, yeah, no, he was going through a hard time, but he would, again, I always tried to keep it happy with him. He was a very nice, happy guy. But kind of at the end, he was, a bit aggressive. He was, you didn't know where it was coming from. And you have to tell yourself, it's not him anymore. This is another version of him, but this isn't him anymore. So it made it easier for me anyways, to deal with. But yes, he wasn't really aware. He was more in that kind of dementia world where, if when I was making dinner, if I could put the TV on for him, that seemed to settle him down. don't get him too involved in things because everything was just too much for him. So yeah, I remember when he was first diagnosed and told, there was some clarity here and there with him. And I remember he said, don't ever let the kids see me when I'm bad and shoot me. And I was like in a, like, I was trying to process it myself. So, you can't do that. But, I understood what he was saying. He didn't want his own children to see him in a state. And it was bad at the end. He was bad. He hung on for a very long time. Not when you think about it, other people said, oh, for 20 years, it was shorter for him. But at the end, it wasn't a happy place for him. That's for sure.
Before we move on, and I'm especially interested in this just because, like I said, I can relate just, being a parent and, having younger children. My kids are 12, 10, and 8, so my 12 and 10-year-old are almost the identical ages as your son and daughter. How was his interaction with the kids over that time period while he was still in the home? Like, were they afraid to approach and interact with him, or did they try more so? Or
when he was in the home, he was at a point where he was definitely not him. He wasn't all that verbal, um, uh, and he was starting to get angry and lash out. And I left it up to the kids. I said, listen, I don't want you to remember your dad like this, because your dad was your dad and he was an amazing father and a great guy. If you want to visit him, I can take you. And if you don't have to, because I wasn't, to be honest, big on the visiting. I would go. And then sometimes I just sit with the nurses because it was a lot for me. Because they'd say, he's having a really bad day. He's yelling, he's trying to hit. So I'm like, okay. So I would just, talk to them. So I was not pushing my kids to see. It was really their decision. And at that point, they were much older. And my son kept on debating, should I see him? Should I not see him? And then my daughter was like, no, I just want to remember my dad the way he was. Because at this point, once he went into when he was going into the home, he had no idea who any of us were. Like if he did speak, he used to call me by his own name, Robert. So he had no idea. And I remember thinking, well, that's nice. At least when he calls me that, I know that he knows that I helped him and that I'm a person that loves him, right? It didn't bother me that he didn't know who my name was or who I was. But it upset me to see him on that decline. So it was hard. Every time I saw him, I'd be sitting in my car for like a half hour crying. And I thought, oh, is this good for me? Is this because he has no idea what's going on. Like he's quite happy and they're giving him good care. So yeah, I did not push my kids to see him. It was up to them. It was their decision.
did your son ever go?
No, he didn't. Yeah, he chose not to. Yeah, and he does not feel guilty or bad about it. My kids don't feel guilty or bad about it. I know, there's always some rumblings of people, and I'm like, however you decide and whatever you want to do, that's up to you. And that is the same for me and my kids. So,
Well, it's like I tell people, I'm not going to tell you how to raise your kids. Don't tell me how to raise mine.
right, exactly. But there's always somebody who wants to tell you.
Always someone. Do you remember the day, Irene, when you made that ultimate decision, Robert, we need to put him into a care home? Do you remember was there a situation that happened, or was it just a culmination? What was that day like? Because that's a tough decision.
Yeah, it is a very tough decision. Before that, I was told that, down the road, this is, he's going to have to go into a home because you would get the care workers coming to visit and doing their assessment. And then, so I would, my job as the caregiver was to go out and tour these places, right? So you can put them on a list and decide where, which is the best place for him to go, which is the best fit, all that sort of stuff. So I think I ended up touring like over 20 facilities for sure, in the area, outside the area, because it is a long waiting list for people. And then it was at the point, and I thank God for the neurologist, the specialist that we went to. We would go to her every couple of times a year, and she would do her assessment. So we went there, and again, I was just haggard. Like life was really, really, really hard, because you'd have to, learn how to put things away in a box and then go to work and oh my gosh, I'm this way, living here and all that sort of stuff. Then come home and deal with that, put that away, deal with that, still work on that. So it was a lot for me to juggle, and the kids and taking them here and there. And my daughter was a competitive cheerleader, so there was a lot of travel with that. And then we went to see her, and she asked me a few questions. I don't even remember the question she asked me. And she asked him a few questions. And she turned to me and she said, "You cannot do this anymore." And I said, "Oh, I think I can." She's like, "No, you cannot do this anymore. He is at this level. He's at the top level now. Is he getting angry? No, a little. Yeah. I'm concerned for your safety," she said, "and his safety. He is going to have way more falls." She said, right now, he refused to wear like the adult diapers, so I would have to change him and all that sort of stuff. She said, it's going to get worse and worse and worse before it gets better. And you need somebody to care for him who is professional and that can help him, because you're not doing him any service, and you're definitely not doing you any service. So I'm going to call, it's a department within the government. I'm going to call them, and then you're going to call them, and I'm going to tell them that they have to find a bed. They called them the bed. They have to find a bed for him, a place for him, because you're either going to have to sign yourself into the psychiatric ward here, and you're going to have to drop him off, and it's just going to be way too messy, or they're going to have to help you find a bed for him, and then you can be his wife and not his caregiver. So that's what happened. And I think I made the call, and I guess she made her calls. And I say a half hour later, 45 minutes, less than an hour for sure, somebody got back to me and they said, "We have a spot for him."
Wow. How old was your daughter at this time?
How old Karina would have been? So she would have been, geez, you help me. I have to do math here. So she was definitely in her teens. Yeah, she was in high school, in her teens. I'd say maybe 15, 16.
Oh, wow.
Maybe.
Okay. That's a very mature, conversation and observation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the neurologist, thank God she was there and she helped us. And, from there, it was me taking him. I remember calling the facility and saying, "Okay, I don't want the big goodbyes because it's going to freak him out. I know I've got a ton of paperwork. When I come there, can you take him? And I'll let him know he's going to a program and it's fun, and there might be dogs there because they love dogs. And if you can take him, to the program, and then I'll fill out the things, and then that way, because I don't know how he's going to behave. I don't know what his reaction is going to be." And they said, "Yeah, not a problem." And they did that. And when the head gal came back, she said, "I've been doing this for 13, 14 years. And she said, and I thought she was going to tell me, "You have to take him back." And I'm like, "Oh my gosh." She said, "He should have been here a long time ago. You took care of him longer than you probably should have." And she said, "He's here. He's going to be safe. It's going to be all good." So I was like, "Oh, okay. Thank goodness." Because, there's that guilt, right?
Absolutely. 100%.
You think that you're doing the best for them. And then once he was there and I saw the care that he was getting, and I took him to programs, but they had like great little programs all the time. And there was dancing. my husband was a handsome fella, and he was younger, of course, and the gals, they were all older. They they were fighting over him for the dances, and I mean, it was so very, very cute. So,
That is
and
cute.
he actually met a gentleman there, an older gentleman there, who was Italian. My husband's background is Italian, and Robert spoke fluent Italian, but kind of at the end, it was all gibber. It was just all gibber, 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 gibber. And if he was really saying anything, and then apparently him and this other gentleman who was also gibbering, they would speak. It was very broken, but it was Italian. They were speaking Italian to each other. So it's just like the mind is like an amazing, absolutely amazing thing. So yeah, so that was yeah, thank God for that neurologist, let me tell you, because I would have kept on going, and I think, he might have hurt himself or hurt us or something like that. So yeah.
You know, as you're caring for Robert and, leading up to that day when you had to make the ultimate decision to put him in a facility, what were you doing to care for yourself? How were you taking care of Irene? I know you said understandably were in depression. How were you managing? Because now you're not only the mother, you're not also the income earner, you're the caregiver, and you're the dad all in one. How did you find time, and what did you do for yourself? What was the most helpful?
Right. For me, because I didn't have a whole bunch of support. So for me, um, I would kind of get him off to bed, and he would be happy to go to bed and da 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 da. And then I would journal. So I would journal, and that was a nice release for me, because I had to kind of keep everything happy, and it's all good, and don't worry, and
It's hard to do.
everything's going to work out. But yeah, that was my release, was I would journal, because I honestly, there was no time for me to, and no money either for me to do a spa, or, I occasionally went out for drinks with my girlfriends, but it had to be a very quick thing, because I couldn't leave him alone, or I didn't want to leave him with my daughter all that much. So, because my daughter lived with me when my son was going to school. So, but yeah, that was my outlet.
Did you find any helpful resources online, or when he got that diagnosis, a good friend of ours who's very, very uh, high up in the dementia awareness and policy and things, he says it's pretty much diagnose and adios, and then families are left to figure it out, and that's so true. We see that day to day with the families we help, and the people that I speak with on the show here. How did you make yourself educated and understand what this new thing is that's just fallen on your laps?
Yeah, the we have here the Society of Alzheimer's, and they were lovely. I would go to them occasionally, or give them a call occasionally. Um, but there's only so much they can do, and their gear would be more towards elder. So it would be like, well, we have an art class. Oh, I'm sure he'd love it. And I'm like, oh my God, he would love an art class. And she's like, okay, so you come with him, and you have an easel, and he has an easel. And I'm like, yeah, I'm not, I need like him in a spot, not me and him together. But because they were older, right, and people who were retired, and their spouse was going through that, they could be there for them. So there really wasn't a lot for any early onset at that time. Was extremely unusual. I know, unfortunately, that it is happening more and more now, which is, a very sad tale. But yeah, for the most part, it really is you doing, for me, it was me doing my own research. So going to the library, looking stuff up online. I mean, now, holy cow, it's just like explosive, the stuff you can find. Back then, it wasn't so much. And it would terrify me when I'm reading through stuff. I'm like, yeah, I can't really read that right now. Holy moly, we're going down that path, that rabbit hole. And I had a great family doctor at the time. She was wonderful. She was the one who diagnosed him, first of all. And of course, I didn't believe her.
Right.
But, she was very much, how are you doing? What's going on with you? How are you managing this? And, but I mean, again, you had to. I had no choice. It wasn't like I had oh, okay, great. And I can call my mom and she can come over for a bit. It was like, I'm doing it. So yeah, it is. I'm hoping it's better now for people. But at that time, it was up to the caregiver to find all that stuff and talk to as many people as possible. See that there's a program here. Oh my God, I didn't know that. There's a program there. Oh, okay, that's great. Oh my gosh, that's wonderful.
Absolutely.
So yeah, yeah.
Well, a lot of your story, kind of, not a lot of it, but a portion of it, really had taken place during COVID. Did How was that like? Did anything happen while you guys were going through this together during COVID?
Yeah, he actually went into home uh, kind of near the end of 2019, and then COVID happened at the beginning of 2020.
Yeah.
So it affected us in the sense that, I couldn't really visit him. And if I did have to visit him, it would be, and it was a lot of work for the staff too. They would have to bring him to the window, and he was so out of it, they would have to hold his head up. So, and I'd bring one of our little dogs for him to see. So yeah, it definitely changed everything. And if you did go to visit, you'd have to go through that whole process, right? The testing, you had to wait, make sure, all that sort of stuff. Of course, wear a mask. And that for them was scary too, I found. Like going in there, I could see when I wore my mask, like their reaction was like, and nurses were wearing masks and I was so challenging for them. I just, my heart goes out to, the families and the people because their little brains are working so hard with such limited amounts to try and figure things out. And there's only so much they can do, right?
Absolutely.
But yeah, it was very, very challenging during COVID.
I want to talk a little bit about this book that you've written, Forgiving the Man Who Forgot, Grateful Gratitude Attitude. First question is, I know you said for you it's therapeutic to journal and write, so maybe this was a plan all along, but did you have a moment where you say, you know what, I need to share my story with everyone? When did you make the decision to write the book?
It was after I put my husband in full-time care, and I remember coming home. First of all, that night I think I slept like 10 hours, but looking through my journals, and it was full of weepiness and I don't know what I did, right? And I thought, you know what, I want to first of all change the energy of that, because he was a lovely man, he was a great husband, he was a great dad, and I don't want it going out to the universe thinking that he wasn't any of that, because he was. So I thought, I'm going to first of all change that. So I honestly was just therapeutic for me just to start writing about our life together and how wonderful it was. And then when things changed, and then I thought this would help other caregivers. Like, I wonder, maybe I should think about writing, just like a little short story or something like that. One thing led to another, and a friend of mine knew an editor, and I chatted with the editor, and she's like, "This is a great book. Like, this is going to help so many people. So, write more detail about this and send me that and that kind of stuff." And then it just turned into a book, and I self-published it on Amazon, and I did hear from some people that it helped, and I'm like, oh, that's kind of the goal in life, right? You're not here just to serve yourself. You're here to serve others. So yeah, it was really good. Yeah,
That's
it was really good.
the children, your kids. What did your son and daughter, have
Yeah.
they read it?
No, they
No.
have not.
Do they
I
not want
know.
to?
Again, I don't push. So it's
Oh,
whatever
of
their
course.
decision is. I think for me, I wrote about it from like when my mom and my dad were little growing up in Scotland, right? Because I wanted to show that that's where I get my tenacious and able to push through things from that good old Scottish background. This is like my biography, and then first meeting him and all that sort of stuff. I guess for them, and I've told them that it's more than just the that time span with your dad. There's more than that. But it is totally up to them if they want to read it or not.
Sure.
You know.
Sure. Has any of your family or any of your husband's family read it?
Yes, very much. Yeah, it's friends had read it, and I had so many people, my girlfriends especially, and my family going, "We didn't realize it was this bad. Like, we didn't realize it was this hard for you. You should have asked us for more help." And that is another thing I think we tend to do as caregivers. We tend to go, "Well, we can do it. Just keep on piling it. We can do it. We've done it. We can do it." And you can't. Like, you do need help. You do need that support. So yes, everybody said the same thing. I didn't realize what you were going through and how hard it was. And I feel bad not helping you. I'm like, no, but that's okay. It was my journey, right?
Yeah.
So
I know I often tell at our caregiver support groups that we run, Irene, it's like the boiling frog analogy. I don't know if you've heard this before, and this is scientifically true. I majored in science in college. If you get a boiling pot of water and you put that frog in there, that frog is jumping out immediately. But if you put the frog in the water while it's lukewarm and you slowly turn the temperature up, that frog will stay in there even after the water's boiling, because it does not even realize, well, now things are boiling and I shouldn't be in here. And to me, that's caregivers. Your journey with your husband probably started off a little lukewarm, maybe warm, hot, but eventually it got to boiling, and we're just so accustomed to doing what we got to do, we don't stop and realize, you know what, it's gotten too hot. We need to get out of here. We need to get help. And I think that's caregivers. They're the frog.
yeah, my gosh, that is such a great analogy. That is totally it. Totally it. And it's nice that what you are doing is helping, no matter who you're caring for, right? Is that you are helping the caregivers, because that is the backbone. I mean, I think like the majority of them tend to be women, and in their like 40s to 60s. In Canada, anyways, those are the stats.
That's about
But
normal for the States. Yeah.
is it? Well, it's just like that support you need, and you don't. Um, I mean, you're on all the social media, which is great, and that's where people look now, right? Is social media. So to have that is so. It's a gift, right? Like you're doing your job, and you're doing something to help so many people, and you might not realize it how much you've helped them, until they see it perhaps years later or something
Right.
like that. But it is, oh my gosh, that's so wonderful.
Well, and that's why we do what we do. We started this show just as a temporary thing at the start of COVID, and said we'll do it for a few weeks, and then for us in Michigan at least, that few weeks turned into a few years, and we've connected with people on every continent, and it's just it's remarkable, because I feel like caregivers, because I was a caregiver for my dad. I didn't even identify as a caregiver. I was doing medical school. I was doing the medical school route, and he came to live with my wife and I as newlyweds, and it was only supposed to be for a few weeks. And it ended up being 2.5 years, and he needed 24-hour care 7 days a week. And for us, it was very difficult, because it got to the point where his medical needs exceeded what we could do for him in the home. And he did have to go into a facility. Thankfully, it was not during COVID. It was well before COVID, 15 plus years ago now, because I would have probably just kept him in the home, because I'm very stubborn. But nobody understood what I was going through, just like no one really understood what you're going through. And I got one more question before we close, but I just want to share this. Talking about your friends, it really reminded me of a story from one of our support groups where a lady came. We just met once a month, but we had 6 of them around the state. She came to the first one, just sat and listened, and that's totally fine. Sometimes people just need to hear that other people understand and are going through similar situations. The second one she came to, she had Kleenex, she was crying, and the facilitator, I wasn't doing this one, they asked her, do you want to share? Are you okay? Because we don't want anybody to feel forced or uncomfortable. And she said, well, my best friend and her husband were best friends with my husband and I ever since like middle school, and they're in their 50s now. So a lifetime friendship. And she said she doesn't want to be friends with me anymore. And she thinks I'm too busy for her because her husband, his dementia had really progressed where she couldn't take him to the movies or out to a restaurant because he might be incontinent or he might be inappropriate. And, they told her, they said, do not hold your friend accountable. Just, forgive her. She doesn't know what you're going through. And hopefully she never will. And you could appreciate that. You don't wish that on anyone. But she can't understand what you're going through because she's never gone through it. So when you feel like you're in a good place, if she doesn't want to talk to you, write her a letter. She will guaranteed read the letter, right? My grandma used to always say, they may not talk to you, but they'll read whatever you write. And explain to her what you're really going through and tell her, I'm not upset. I would love to go out, but this is what we're dealing with. I don't want to go to dinner with you and your husband, and my husband says something really inappropriate or vulgar out loud to the waitress or to people next to us, and then that would embarrass the two of you. Or we go to a movie and my husband has an accident, all of these factors. That's why we can't go out anymore. And hopefully she will, if she's a true friend, which I'm sure the woman was, 40 plus years of friendship, then you're giving her the closest thing you can to understanding what you're going through. But that's the thing, when you're going through something that nobody in your circle has gone through or has experienced, it's always the worst case scenario and it's probably exaggerated. But when you're a caregiver for a loved one, very little is ever exaggerated,
No, that is, I can totally relate to this poor
Yeah.
woman because I was in the same situation. And also, you are so nervous that they're going to misbehave or make somebody else feel uncomfortable, or you're not going to be able to manage that or control that.
Right.
So I can totally relate to what she is going through. But yeah, I am sure that her friend totally understood once she wrote that letter. So, and for me, my friend, like I told them that, he had dementia and he was sick and blah, 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 but everybody's life is very busy, right? And I would never have asked that of my friends anyways, because I didn't want to do it.
Right.
There was many times where I'm like, okay, we're going to get this done. It's going to happen. Today's going to be another day. So I would never ask my friends to do any of that. But yeah, support is key. So you having that support with other people who can relate, like whether she chose to stay within the group or not, that's huge. And there wasn't that, I remember, when I was going through what I was going through. But yeah, no, it's different now. Thank goodness it's different now.
Real quick before we go, Irene, thank you again for, the vulnerability of sharing your story. I think it will resonate and benefit so many people. I really do. And I recommend everybody go out and get the book. We're going to have links in the show notes. They've been up on the screen, but why don't you, for people that might be listening and not watching, where would you like them to go to get your book?
I sell it on Amazon.
Okay.
So it's on Amazon. You look it up by, you can either look it up by my name or you can look it up by the title. And also just another note, and what also helped me kind of through the process more of after the math was being grateful and having that gratitude that I did have that time with my husband. And it does change your attitude. And when you do write that out, what are you grateful for? All that sort of stuff. I don't know what happens in my little brain, but you see things a little bit differently and a little bit brighter. And, it just helps you have a different perspective rather than, always me. Because that's an easy thing to go down that rabbit hole.
And you also have your website too, correct?
Yes, I have a website. Yeah. Grateful Gratitude Attitude.
Attitude.com, and that will also be in the show notes. You're on Instagram as Grateful Attitude.
Gratitude Attitude. I know it's a mouthful, isn't it?
And we'll be sure to share that as well. But before we go, just wanted to ask, if you don't mind, how is life now for you and your children?
Life is lovely because I have gone through, it took me a long time. It took me years to get to the point where I am now. But yeah, life is lovely. My kids are happy and healthy. Christmas time was a special time for my family. So, with Robert and, it's Italian, food is a big thing. So we, um, uh, honor him on Christmas Eve. We have a big, seafood, festive, thing for him. And we talk about, now we share stories, that aren't we're not sitting crying about it anymore. We're sharing funny stories, things that he did, how fun he was, and how grateful we'll be to have him in our lives. So, but it did take me years to get to this point. It wasn't an overnight thing. It wasn't like, oh, in a couple of months, you're going to be fine. For me, it took me a while. I did go to a therapist a few times too to kind of help guide me. And I also wanted to make sure I handled things well with my kids because my kids are very important to me. So she helped me with that. But yeah, if like whenever you need support or help, get it is my main thing. Like, don't be afraid to ask for that because it makes huge difference in your life. It's just even a kind word or a smile or something. It's amazing how far that goes.
Yeah. And again, the old saying, you don't know what someone else is going through, and so just having that kindness and a smile could just change their whole day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
All right. Well, Irene Walker, author of Forgiving the Man Who Forgot, Grateful Gratitude Attitude. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for your time and carry on all your good work.
Thank you, Irene. We'll talk to you soon.
Okay, sounds good.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for joining us today here at All Home Care Matters. All Home Care Matters is here to help families as they navigate these long-term care issues. We invite you to visit us at allhomecarematters.com, where there's a private, secure, fillable form where you can give us feedback, show ideas, or if you have questions. Every form is read and responded to. And remember, you can listen to the show on any of your favorite podcast streaming platforms or watch the show on our official YouTube channel. Just make sure that you hit that subscribe button so that you never miss an episode. We'd also like to say thank you again to Irene Walker, the author of Forgiving the Man Who Forgot, Grateful Gratitude Attitude. We look forward to seeing you next time here at All Home Care Matters.
Thank you for joining us today. We look forward to you joining us again on another episode of All Home Care Matters. To learn more about the show and to connect with us, visit us at allhomecarematters.com.